my talk is visibilizing and usualizing the full diversity of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans plus community. Or, we're here, we're queer, we're old, we're young, we're able-bodied, we're disabled, we're rich, we're poor. Some of us might be related to some of you. But there may well be somebody here who thinks that they have never, ever knowingly met an LGBT person. I wonder why that is. Maybe it's because we're a bit invisible. Back in the 60s, when I was a teenager, I knew I was a bit different from everybody I met. I felt odd, wrong. My school told me nothing about LGBT people. It was as if we never existed. It wasn't until much later that I discovered I had been studying some of these wrong people with unmentionable lives and lifestyles. So I'm kind of keen to find out if things have changed. So I'm going to be asking you, if you would be so kind, as to put up your hand if, when you were at school, you heard something positive about lesbian and gay, bisexual, trans people. Oh, have a look around. There aren't many hands. So, things might have changed a bit, but given what we've just seen, it seems we have a lot to do before people can learn about the full diversity of everybody, of all the LGBT people. I came out to myself as a lesbian when I was about 17. And I was just tentatively beginning to challenge that concept of wrongness. And I wanted to find out about other lesbians and gays. So I went to books. But it was a tough job. Queer history had been deliberately hidden. It was very deliberately hidden. And I didn't have a very big state. What I did have was the library. However, I didn't have the words that we have now to describe who I was. I didn't have the analysis to describe and explain why our experiences and existence have been lied about and denied. It's just no wonder that so many of us feel attacked, wrong. That the prejudice and hatred directed at us is somehow justified. That we have some sort of shameful condition. After all, homosexuality was illegal. I later found out that as far as psychiatry concerned, lesbian and gay people were deemed abnormal, deviant, in need of treatment, and that some religions saw me as an abomination. It wasn't until 1990 that the World Health Organization finally recognized that we did not have a mental disorder. Trans people had to wait till 2019 for that to happen. I was beginning to think I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted education to be a place where people could have self-discovery and self-respect. But once I became one, I realized that we had been lied to by omission. That the education process, by hiding us, by making sure that we were not in the curriculum, were colluding with the process of demonizing us. No wonder so many of us were hiding. We needed protection. So, it occurred to me that what we needed was to make our contributions more visible. Hence my term, visibilizing. It's kind of simple. I just simply want to make visible what has been made invisible. It's not in the dictionary yet. I believe it is no accident that our presence throughout history was denied by a white, Western, middle to upper class, able-bodied patriarchy. They have consistently denied the reality of our existence. But I believe we were there in the caves. Now, it might be dawning on you, as it was beginning to occur to me, that the process that I'm describing actually applies to many marginalized groups. Any group that does not have a place at the top table. Now, diversity is so important. Right now, there'll be young people in another place around the world who are sitting terrified. They can't come to terms with who they are. They have not seen themselves. They think they're the only one who feels like they do in the whole planet. I feel that invisibility feeds shame. So, when some queer folk take that step out of the closet and then stand proud and declare themselves to be out and proud, that is a vital step. But, as Dr. Rohit Dasgupta says, that takes privilege, racial, social, economic. Since 1972, in this country, we have had pride marches, an incredible important part of the visibilizing process. 5 years earlier, because of terrific amount of campaigning, we had the first piece of legislation which began to decriminalize homosexuality. It simply said that men over 21 could have sex if they consented in private. As you can imagine, it didn't solve all the problems. In fact, it made quite a few. Since then, much community action has resulted in further rights. So now, for instance, lesbians and gays can marry, we have the equal age of consent, and some of the barriers in front of trans people to transition were removed. But you may well be aware, the situation for trans people right now is pretty horrendous. With 2010 came the Equality Act, incredibly important piece of legislation, which declared that unfair discrimination based on prejudice against the age, disability, sex, gender reassignment, pregnancy and maternity, race, sexual orientation, religion or belief of a person was now outlawed. Amazing. But I have to say, I'm not convinced that that law is always put in place. It's kind of questionable how effective it is, but it is there. In 2004, I was a bit more visible. I had been part of the process of challenging Section 28, which was a piece of legislation that came in 1988, which said that local authorities could not promote homosexuality or homosexuality as a pretended family relationship. It was a horrendous piece of law. It silenced teachers and students. It forced them back into the closet. And it was very traumatizing for many people. But it did go in 2003. So, I was now chair of Schools Out UK, which is a voluntary organization which supports LGBT teachers. And we realized that all teachers needed some tools to make their curriculum more inclusive. So we began to think, what might they need? They already had Black History Month, which was every October. But it kind of occurred to me that if we had a lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender history month, then teachers, lecturers, museums, the media, unions, local authorities could actually begin to focus on the contributions that LGBT people had made. It would enable people like Alan Turing, Jackie Kay, Emmeline Pankhurst, Claude Mackay, Jan Morris, Emmeline Pankhurst, already on the curriculum, to be outed. Well, the first LGBT History Month was in February 2005. Now, teachers could talk about LGBT people in the pop culture, in social media. I dreamed that in biology, teachers would finally tell the story about the fact that within the animal kingdom, there are multiple sexual orientations and multiple gender identities. Well, to do that, we gave them some websites. So you'll find on the Schools Out, LGBT History Month, Out in the Past, and the Classroom website, innumerable resources, all free, which enable people to recognize that lesbian and gay people have been living their lives, fighting wars, inventing things that you and I take for granted, writing prose, poetry, plays, music, and performing them. These websites then led me to be able to promote my second concept, usualizing. I wanted rid of the word normal. It's a pejorative term. It leads to the concept of abnormal. And we've been called abnormal for long enough. If we usualize, we get rid of the gay lesson, the black lesson. And what we do is we embed all the marginalized group into every lesson. We become usual, everyday, ordinary. So, when a teacher usualizes, they simply reference a group and move on. However, so often, when we're presented with an example of a gay person, we get a picture of a white, young, able-bodied man. So, at Schools Out, what we wanted to do was to publish and promote the others. The lesbians, the trans, the bisexuals, LGBT of different heritages, the old, and LGBT people who are parents. With the rise of the Me Too and the Black Lives Matter movement has become a drive to decolonize the curriculum. So that for schools and universities to do that, they will have to enable all their students to discover their hidden histories. We need to teach them about colonization and how it works. How colonizers move into another country and steal their ideas, their raw materials, their resources, and claim them for their own. That they kidnap, enslave, and in some cases commit genocide on indigenous people. That they use indoctrination to deny their traditions, their language, their history, and impose their own. We have to take responsibility for the consequences of those actions. So, to recap, over the last 65 years, we have gained here in the UK some queer civil rights. But we can't afford to be parochial. For when we look abroad, we can see that many LGBT people are suffering under some pretty horrendous homophobic laws. Eastern Europe would be a case in point. Many Commonwealth countries, like Uganda, Nigeria, Jamaica, Pakistan, are executing incredibly misogynistic and homophobic laws. We need to take responsibility for the fact that we exported those laws. That before we went into those countries, they were quite comfortable with different sexual orientations and gender identities. And yet, when people are coming from those places, looking for a place of safety, we put enormous barriers in their way before they can be seen to be actually accepted here. The other thing is that if you look at what the Eastern European countries have just come up with, quite recently, they look suspiciously like Section 28. So we're good exporters of homophobia. I think we need to support the local LGBT groups to fight those laws. But we also need to work here to challenge the rising hatred against refugees and people who are seeking asylum. We're beginning to move into a post-COVID time. Lockdown has been horrendous for young LGBT people. It's been a nightmare for many of them. They've been isolated with families that may not be comfortable with their sexual orientation, and some of them may be downright hostile. So it's crucial when they go back into the school that they are welcomed as their full selves. Teachers have had a pretty horrendous time of it, and they've been asked to do things that they weren't trained for, that they weren't necessarily comfortable with, and many are exhausted. But I am going to ask every one of them to build a mirror that reflects, visibilizes, and utilizes every one of their students. And I promise that I will continue, along with my colleagues, to provide them the resources for them to do just that.